crunching bones the whole day. People like, what? No. Okay, good. So we're good.
Well, this is part of the experience.
Of course,
the Peru experience. Are we recording?
Yeah, we are recording. All right, Maria. So good morning.
Good morning, Sergey.
So maybe you want to introduce yourself, a bit brief about yourself, who you are, where you're from, where you came here. You know?
Yeah, I think that the story that we each bring to the table is actually relevant and important to present in order to kind of understand a little bit of what happens here and what the process does.
Yeah, go ahead.
What the medicine actually does. So,
just want to check if it's recording. Yeah, it's on.
So, so I'm 54 years old. My name is Maria Amadea, and we come from California, but I am originally from Romania. I grew up in Romania during the communist regime, and Ceausescu, yes. And I had quite a story, I would say quite a story, from the time of my birth all the way into adulthood. A beautiful story in its own way, but a very painful story as well. I'll tell a few things about it, because what happened here with the medicine, it goes actually back to what happened in the past. So in order to understand what the medicine actually does and did for me, I think if we have the time, I could very briefly tell a little bit about that story. Is that okay?
Well, let's start somewhere.
Yeah. So I come in a very sort of a sad family environment. I was not really wanted as a child. As a result, I was abandoned at about 1.5, and a grandmother took me in until about 4 or 5 years old, and then my own biological father, who never accepted me as his own, made arrangements, because he was in a position of power, made arrangements to put me in an orphanage. And I was in that orphanage for a few years, I think about 4 or 5 years. And then I was adopted at about 9 years old. I was adopted in a very wealthy family, but a very troubled family. There was a story of incest when I arrived with a previous daughter that they adopted. And so at 9 years old, I was sit down and exposed to this sort of a very sad, painful adult life that it was hard for me to put together at 9, and I was expected to have this tremendous support and understanding to my adoptive mother, who was in her 50s at the time. And so even though I was very well taken care of physically, emotionally was kind of a disaster for me. At 14, I tried to commit suicide by taking rat poison. And then at 18, I left the home. I just couldn't handle everything anymore. And I went to the university. I always saw education as my salvation from all this dysfunction. And so I went to the university, and I fell in love right away with the smartest boy around. He was a very good man, sort of a genius already at 18. And we were young, and I was hopeful that I could create the family I never had. And we did that. We did that for about 18 years together. We have 2 beautiful children. My son Andrei is now 32 years old. My daughter Diana is now 26. But the marriage had ups and downs, like all marriages. And about, let me think, after about 18 years of being together, things were not going so well, even though he's a very good person. My struggle started in graduate school, actually, because he got his PhD. So we came to United States. We immigrated to United States to get our doctorate degrees. We were both in the field of mathematics, and he was a genius. And I always felt stupid, even though I was undergoing my own PhD. I always felt like I could never keep up, because he was so far advanced in the field. And so because of those feelings that I had of not good enough, of we were not always connecting, I started some kind of a spiritual search myself, out of depression. And slowly I started looking for answers, and started reading a lot of books. I was raised Christian, although in communist Romania Christianity was not allowed, but there were always the grandparents, there were always the pictures, the icons, the Christian Orthodox icons around, so. But it didn't really have a deep impact on me. And I also remember I was in the scientific field, and so I started with Buddhism. And so that appealed a little more to me. And then from Buddhism, I moved to Advaita Vedanta. And so I opened up to this world of possibilities of me being more than this person with a mind and a body who struggles, who is depressed, who is trying to find happiness, because, they all opened up this possibility of being more than that. Yeah. And in 2000, I have a devotional nature. I always had that. In 2000, I found a spiritual teacher in India that I became very attached to. And my husband at the time had issues with that. Yeah, he feared that whole process. He feared religion in general. He felt like religion was for weak people. He was strong himself. He had his own biases about any spirituality. And so that slowly kind of deteriorated the marriage a little bit. And what I found in India for me was such a transformative experience. I had no doubts anymore. I mean, the connection, I know people have different experiences with spiritual teachers. With my own spiritual teacher, which is Satya Sai Baba, it was the most pure, the most beautiful experiences that I had. I felt like I found the parent, the mother, the father. I found there what I wanted, and so I invited my husband at the time to see for himself, because he had all kinds of fears about it. Very valid fears, because there's a lot of movements that, create all kind of abuses, but that was not my experience at all. And he kind of refused it, and so slowly we came apart, and I initiated a divorce. And now I regret it. Now, many years later, because one of the things that my teacher always said was love all, serve all, help always, never hurt anyone. So in a way, even though my husband at the time could not understand me, he was a very good man. He was a wonderful family person. And maybe if I was hanging in there for a little while longer and really practice the teachings that I heard about, right? But, I have to own it to my own youthfulness and ignorance, and And so the family went, separated, and the children would go back and forth like standard American divorce, very amicable divorce. 5 days they would be with me, 5 days they would be with their father. And then I was free, and I continued my spiritual search. However, life is, the second marriage, the marriage after that, which was with a so-called spiritual man, right? It was even more of a disaster than my first marriage. And so my children were exposed to a lot of suffering. They saw their mother suffer a lot, and for that, I regret tremendously. I feel, even though I love my children very much, and it's my greatest accomplishment. I consider it my greatest accomplishment. I'm very proud of them. I know that I have created some pain for them. Life has moved me. I left the field of mathematics because once I opened myself to this, to this field of spirituality, I just couldn't feel I could function anymore in that environment. It was highly competitive, produced research paper after research paper, and it was a lot of stress for me. And so I moved, under the influence of all this sort of a spiritual teachings that I was reading, I moved into social work. So I actually got a degree from the University of Chicago, a master's degree in social work, and worked for many years in nursing homes and in U.S., mostly in California, and got licensed there, so I was able to do good work. I worked in a hospital for 15 years in Walnut Creek, Virginia Hospital. We did some very good works. And eventually I opened up my private practice. And so this is what I'm doing today. I have my own private practice where we live. I see usually anywhere between 15 and 20 patients a week. I love them all. It's my area where I can practice this love all, serve all kind of attitude. And nevertheless, in spite of all this, so from a financial, social standpoint, everything is in place, there's still some sadness. There is some, I've had a few very spiritual experiences, and one I want to describe to you, which I feel is the grace of my teacher, but 99% of the time, I was not happy. I'm struggling. Maybe you could say I'm okay from a worldly point of view, but like that deep down okayness is missing, And so a glimpse that I had was kind of a vision for me. I was in my normal state, my normal consciousness, and struggling, the usual struggle that most people have. And kind of a voice said, so I was in a darker room, which is symbolic for living in darkness, so to speak, right? So I was in a darker room, and then a room around the corner seemed filled with light. And this voice said, if you go there, you will find God there, right? And I was very afraid. I was very afraid to go there. There was a part of me that knew that there has to be some kind of letting go of what I know in order to go there. Yeah, and that was very fearful for me. But then the logic came, hey, you've been doing this your whole life, this holding on to what you know, which is your own version of misery, with some good days and some bad days. It's not like misery, but overall it's a kind of misery, the ups and downs of life, And so in the vision was like, hey, what have you got to lose? You already, the familiar, the familiar. Why don't you try, why can't you be a little adventurous and try something different? So when I said that, in my vision, so there was a kind of letting go, and I approached kind of the room, like very timidly, like a child approaching something that you don't know, but you're afraid of. And as I approached this light, everything stopped except this vibration that I started vibrating. And the only explanation I can say, I would say I love you. So the vibration said I love you. My own vibration said I love you. And from that light, that vibration of I love you came back. And there was this circle of I love you, I love you, I love you. And I cannot explain to you how it feels. There was just, everything stops, and it's just the most, it feels so familiar. It feels like this is what I've been looking for my whole life, right? Like to be in this vibration in which everything is okay, and it's just, everything is just love, And so that was one of the glimpses that I had, which prompted me to continue my search. And at the same time, I have friends who are psychotherapists, so we do a lot of processing together. So I had an impression that, all my past is taken care of. I've forgiven everybody. I looked a million times at what happened in my childhood, what happened with my own mother, what happened with my biological father, what happened with my adoptive parents, what happened with my marriage. I had to feel like it's been processed and over-processed, and I've forgiven everybody, And nevertheless, there was a heaviness in my life, yeah. And so one of my friends in California, who's also a marriage and family therapist, has dabbled a little bit more in medicine, in plant medicine. And so he suggested that we do the 3 times protocol that MAPS offers. This is the, I think it's called Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And so they are doing now stage 3 clinical trials for MDMA to try to approve it as a resource for psychotherapy so we can use it. And they have a specific 3-time protocol, three times of therapy with a substance, and therapy before, therapy in between, therapy after. So I did this with my friend. And the first 2 times was heavy, was a lot of crying, a lot of emotions. But by the 3rd session, I was able to reach again this vibration of love. So now, as you and I know, MDMA is a chemical substance, and it's got good sides and bad sides to it, right? So there are downsides to using MDMA, and I certainly wasn't interested in being on it for the long term, right? I wanted it therapeutically, not just recreationally, to feel good, and so in this context, within this context, I was looking for a plant medicine that would be a heart opener, that would enable me to be more all right with myself, with my life, with who I am, with God, with my relationship with God, to understand more of that. And so I found Huachuma, and I found your website, and I listened to every interview that you've done with everyone, and I liked what I heard. It just felt like this is the medicine that I'm looking for. This is how I felt. Within a week of finding out, we booked everything, and we decided this is right for us, and we just read more and more about this medicine. So I arrive here, and what I want to say is, both Romania, which is symbolic of my childhood, and India, which is symbolic of my spiritual opening, have been very meaningful to my life. Yeah. And so when I came to Peru, Peru was a little bit of both for me. It felt like going to Romania back to Romania, but also going to India. It was both, right? And so, and this is why I felt like I needed to say about a little bit about my story, because that's how it makes sense, a little bit more what happens in the medicine, yeah. So another thing that I need to say is that although until about a year ago, I have been very healthy from a physical point of view. About a year ago, I started having major gastrointestinal issues. I would have constant pain on my right side, but on two sides on my right side. And I have undergone every possible test, CT scans, endoscopies, colonoscopies, test after test after test, and many more that my wonderful gastroenterologist prescribed. And after a year of undergoing many tests and thousands of dollars, some paid by insurance, some out of pocket, he came up with this diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And he put me on budesonide, which is a corticosteroid, and it's the first line of treatment for Crohn's or colitis. And the medicine I didn't feel like the medicine really did help. It reduced the symptoms a little bit, but it certainly didn't solve anything. And again, my relationship with medications has always been, you use them a little bit, but I have no intention on being on any medication, whether it's Motrin or whether it's budesonide or anything. I don't like the idea of being on a medicine for the long term. So also for the physical healing, I was looking and hoping that this medicine, the Huachuma medicine, can help. Yeah, so I was looking, when I came, I was looking to renew my connection with God. I was looking for some physical healing. I was looking for spiritual healing, for emotional healing. So this is the baggage. Yeah, this is the baggage that I brought to the table. Yeah, which is a heavy baggage, I have to say.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Indeed. A long list to do.
A long list to do, yes.
Okay, so that was a very good introduction. So let me just ask you a few questions before we move into the actual experience here. You said your second marriage was more disastrous because the guy was a spiritual kind of.
Yeah.
What was his spirituality?
Oh, he was following the same teacher, Satya Sai Baba, like me. We met there in India, and my heart was very open. I was very spiritually open there, and so I fell in love again, and I thought, oh, now I can have everything. He was a physician himself, and I thought everything would work out lovely. And it was the greatest heartbreak of my life, because I brought him here to U.S., loved everything about him. I did have the children who would come half of the time, be with us. But I thought I could handle everything. I could love him, I could love the children. I think everything would be okay. However, and I helped him, to adjust to U.S., get his green card, get his degrees here so he can practice here. He got a job at the same hospital that I was working at, and when that happened, he said, I no longer can be with you. I love you, but family life is not for me. Goodbye. Yeah. And so, so that was devastating to me.
Quite a
troubled. Let's say troubled. He was troubled. He says now. He says, "Well, I was immature." He's asked forgiveness many times for what happened. He said, "I was immature. I didn't know. I'm very sorry what I did." So
he was mature enough to get the green card.
Right.
Anyway.
So that was what happened. But the sad part in all of this is that my children, to me, that is the saddest part, that my children were exposed to this. They saw me crying and fall apart many times. No matter how much I try to be strong for them, so because also he left, he would leave and go and leave and go. So this coming and going, he'd be sorry, he would leave, and then he'd feel guilty and come back and then go, and until at some point it all ended. But so it was it wasn't just like goodbye, I'm going. It was a prolonged back and forth, and the kids were exposed to that. Yeah.
That's the worst part of the story.
Right.
So the other question I want to ask, when you became the social worker, did that include, psychotherapy?
Yeah. So in U.S., if you get a master's degree in social work, or a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, or master's degree in counseling, if you follow, there's a process, right? If you follow the Board of Behavioral Sciences process, eventually you can be a licensed psychotherapist.
So that's what you became.
Right. So beyond the 2 years of the degree, there is also a process which usually takes 2-3 years of actually practicing in a setting, seeing patients under the supervision of an experienced clinician who signs for these 3,600 hours or something like that, and then so you do that work, and then the board allows you to be a psychotherapist.
So you are a licensed psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist, yeah.
Psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move. I just want to clarify these few things.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt when you were talking. So let's move now to your actual experience of Huachuma here. Okay. So let's move now to your actual experience. How was for you to come here, experience Huachuma, from the beginning through the process until the end? So maybe we start from the first ceremony.
Yeah. So you already know I'm very sensitive to these medications. To these medicines. Because I'm now used to them, and also my personality is that I'm very sensitive. And so the first medicine was very hard on me. The first time you gave me to drink the medicine was very, very hard. And I have to summarize and say that the entire experience here for me felt like a spiritual boot camp. Yeah, emotional and spiritual boot camp. Yeah, very intense. And I have many things to be grateful for bearing through the process, but it was a difficult process for me. I listened to the videos that you posted, and people have some amazing transcendental experience. For me, it was work. It was work and more work and more work. And I would say 90% work and maybe 10% some joy. Yeah. And the work, so I'm coming back to this idea that Peru was a combination of Romania for me. And for instance, we would be in the fields, right? So Romania has these fields of corn. That's my childhood, these fields of corn and potatoes. That's where I would walk with bare feet, and so the healing, the way the healing works in that state when you are in the medicine, a bit of an altered state, so the rational mind is not firing as much. It's still there, but not firing as much. In that state, you can kind of go back a little bit to that place of 3-4-year-olds, me, 3-4-year-old, 5, whatever I was, walking on the bare ground, and so what would come up for me was how, even though the story sounds kind of very sad, this child nobody wanted, I remember as a child, sometimes this person was feeding me, sometimes this person was feeding me. I was always bare feet because I didn't have shoes, but now in the medicine, you kind of see like it was okay. I survived and it was okay. It wasn't so bad. One day in the field, I walked bare feet again. I walked to feel the wet soil like I used to as a child, just walking among this time was a potato field. And they have those grooves where they put water, and it was just so healing for me, and to be able to look back, say, you're okay. in a way, maybe parents were not there, but some force was there. Some people call it God, but something was there still protecting you, And so the first, even though that first experience, I almost left after the first experience because it was really, really hard on me. I felt like there was a knife going through my guts, and it was a combination of physical pain and felt like dying. I don't know how it felt. It was just, I was hit by the spiritual 2x4, And the interesting thing about it is that second day I felt a little better in my GI issues, right? And so we had our talk about how to, adjust the medicine and what not. And then we went microdosed a little bit for two times. And then by the third ceremony, so the first one was strong, the second one was very, very mild, just the 2 pills that you gave me, and then you gave me 3 pills. By the time the third ceremony ended, I felt a major improvement in my GI stuff, in my gastrointestinal issues. So even though it was hard, that encouraged me to stay. Like, something is happening here. Something good is happening here. Yeah. So that was the first week for me. Yeah. The second week, then you put me back on the liquid medicine, right? So I wasn't microdosing, taking my little pills, You put me back on the liquid medicine. And even though I could bear with it, the next week, what came up for me is the wound of separation from love. So now miraculously, I wrote to everyone I know, my GI issues are taken care of. My God, it's a miracle, What transpired for me is this pain here around my heart center. And when I talk about my heart center, I want to say that never was I worried about my physical heart. I knew this is, the Indian sages say that the spiritual heart is to the right, a little from the center, it's a little bit to the right, the physical heart is a little bit to the left. So there was I knew this is emotional pain, this is spiritual pain. I was not worried about my heart, but it was hurting like hell in this area, in this chest area, yeah. And that went on for at least 4 or 5 ceremonies, yeah. But with that, even though I did have to bear through it, there were a lot of insights that would come. Yeah, because these questions were always in the back of my mind. We hear God is love, love is God, you are God, you are that love. I heard all of these beautiful ideas, right? But I didn't feel it. I didn't feel deserving of God's love. I never felt good enough, even though by social standards, you could say I'm a good person, right? I try to be good, I try to be kind, I try to be gentle. But when I looked inside myself, there was some selfishness in there, decisions that I made out of selfishness. Also, I operate in the world from a sense of separateness. You are different than me, and so there is a selfishness in that, yeah. Just that mode of operating, right? I don't operate from this place of we are all one, and I see you, I see me in you, I operate from the most traditional, mindset, and so that made me feel not good enough, right? I wasn't as generous, as kind, as loving to everyone as would make me deserving of God's love. So there was a lot of self-judgment there. And the medicine helped with that very much. Yeah, so I had times by the river of just, one of the things that the medicine does is quiets the mind a little bit. And so you become more emotional, it becomes more primal a little bit. Yeah. So So you don't really have to understand what and what's happening. But there was a lot of screaming, a lot of release, just like all of this sadness coming out in the form of sitting on a rock and just screaming and screaming and screaming. And the first few ceremonies, I looked at everyone in my life, and I could see how they tried their best. I could feel it. This idea of, well, everybody's trying their best. We all know that. You're like, forgive everybody, everybody's trying their best. And so that's what I've done with my mind, but I didn't actually feel it. Yeah, which is a kind of a spiritual bypass if you think about it, right? I thought about it, okay, you got to forgive your mother, you got to forgive your father, you got to forgive this, you got to forgive that. So I made myself forgive them, but I never felt it, right? So in the medicine, I really felt their goodness. Yeah, I felt the pain of my mother, what she must have gone through, the shame of my father, why he denied me my very existence, why he put me away, so I felt all of those things, and I could have compassion for them, but yet, so that was the second week. Yet there was still left this idea of, now they're all good and you are the bad one. Now I was left with everybody's good and I am not good, right? So the last week was working on my connection with God, right? What is that like? Where is this love that my Swami talks about? Because he says this love is in you. You are that love. They talk about your essence is Sat, Chit, Ananda, consciousness, truth, consciousness, and bliss, right? Your essence is love. So where is this love? Where is it? And I think the third week for me was kind of understanding that love comes from God for now. This is where I am. That I was able to feel a little bit God's love, and to let go a little bit of this idea of not good enough, and to have the same compassion that I had for my parents and those who did wrong onto me, to have a little bit of compassion for myself. Yeah. So to give you an example, and not beat myself up with like, you're not good enough, you have to be better, you have to serve more, you have to, be less selfish, be this, not to kind of move away from that energy a little bit. Maybe 2 ceremonies ago, we went back up at the temple on top, and back to that field. There's fields around that little Inca temple there. And this time, which is that's fascinating to me, because the first time we went there, it was me moving through the potatoes and remembering as a child I used to pick up the bugs that hide under the leaves of the potatoes. We used to pick all those bugs in jars and just walking on the bare field, This time, in the same place, the potato field was not there anymore, which I think is like strange, But there was a field of chrysanthemums, yeah. So 3-4 rows of chrysanthemums. You know what a chrysanthemum is? It's like a mum. Do you know what a mums are? Mums are flowers. It's like a yellow flower, a bit bigger than mums, And so there was that field there, and I moved just to give you a sense of what the process is like.
You talking about the rock?
When we went to the rock.
Oh yeah, the bigger...
Yellow.
Flower,
Yeah. So I saw that, and I felt drawn to go close to it. Yeah. So again, I'm walking through there, and I stopped, and I smell one of the flowers. Yeah. immediately, because in psychology we also know that the power of smell is tremendous in triggering stuff. Yeah. So
brings you back to your childhood.
It brings you back to whatever you need to go back to, right? So I smelled that flower, and immediately I remembered how many times on October 27, which was my adoptive mother's birthday. So you have to remember I'm 9, and I'm hoping again that I'll have the family I always wanted, right? Because this is like my pattern in my life. I don't have the family that I want, that I'm yearning for, which is a call for love ultimately, but in the child's mind was, I want the family, right? So I remember how many times I used to buy that flower on October 27, which was her birthday. And my father would give me a little bit of money to buy something else for her. And I just sat with that flower and had a conversation with my mom, my adoptive mom, and was able to say to her, I know you as a woman, Naomi as a woman, of the same age that she was when she adopted me, right? I know that you've been hurt, right? Because she adopted me out of a huge betrayal. Her decision to adopt me was because of a huge betrayal she experienced. So I said to her, I know as a woman you must have been beaten up and hurt, and but it wasn't fair for you to put that on a 9-year-old. Right? So I was able to have that conversation not from a place of beating her up, but more from a place like, I know you were hurting, but it wasn't my role to save you. I was just a little girl. It was too much for me, to bear your pain, to solve your pain. So this gives you an example, of what happens under the substance, right? You go back there, and I could stand up for myself, look upon that little girl as well, like how much I was trying to please her, to make her love me, to be the mom that I didn't have. So I was able to have those feelings for me as well. Because subsequently, the way you write the story is, you're not good enough. That's why people don't love you, because you're not good enough. But then you start seeing, you're not good enough for God to love you. You're not good enough for your mother to love you. You're not good enough for your husband to love you. So it just keeps going. So ultimately, that softness that I have for others, like everybody is trying. I was able to have a bit of a softness for myself.
That's a powerful story.
Yeah. Yeah, also, I wasn't looking for, this is another thing, I wasn't looking for some amazing psychedelic experiences. To me, I'm afraid of them. It's not something. I was looking for healing of the heart. This is what appealed to me when you said that this is a hard medicine. Yeah.
So do you feel you found it?
Yeah. I feel so. Although it's tough, it wasn't easy. There's something about it. Like when I just described, this is just a snapshot of. So much has happened. This is just a little snapshot that happened in one of the journeys, But, there is pain that comes up. For instance, I was able to feel, when we divorced, Daniel and I, when we divorced, and the children went back and forth, right? My son was 12 at the time, and I asked him, my son is a wonderful soul, I asked my boy, do you think it's okay if mommy lives separate and I'll see you half, and the other half you'll be with dad? In my mind I thought, well, they'll be with their dad. It's not leaving them in an orphanage like my mother did, right? I thought they'll be with their dad, they'll spend more time together, and then the other aunt, they'll be with me. I didn't feel like I was abandoning them, you know. But it was hard on my kids. In a way, I did abandon them 5 days a week.
What was the answer?
Oh, my boy at 12 said, Mom, if that makes you happy, that's okay. No, but then I think about a year or so, because my son was the older one, of going back and forth, my son said to me, you know, Mom, it's really hard, this back and forth, because Dad's energy is much harsher. And when you were there, everything would balance out. And now we go from this to this. And it's hard. Now they have to balance it out instead of us, the adults, balancing it out, you know. Now the kids have to, you know, do it. So I felt that pain. I felt that pain of my children, you know, for what they must, how hard it must have been for them, you know. So that's part of the difficulty with the substance, you know.
Well, I think we need to wrap it up before the battery gets exhausted here, you know. So, just a few things to say. That first of all, I want to, you know, to tell you that you need to give yourself credit for really making it where you are in life, considering the extremely traumatic child.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the worst stories I've ever heard from people here, you know. Orphanage, abandonment, I mean, it's just how worse does it get, you know. So, like, natural tendency would be just a self-destructing path in life. Alcohol, drugs, whatever, you know, because you kind of lose, you lose meaning. I mean, you never find it in the first place, even, you know. So it would be understandable if your life would be a disaster in a social way, you know. But instead of that, you use that, you transform that, you practice alchemy. You took the rough material and you transformed it into more refined substance, which is your education, family, children, you know. So instead of becoming a drug addict, you become a PhD in whatever, what was that? Math, and then the psychotherapist, you know. It's a huge achievement, you know, considering the past, you know. So that's a very important thing to give yourself credit for. It's like, you are a success. In my eyes, in my opinion, you are the success, you know. And then, you know, the willingness to seek for love, for divine, for the high vibration in life. That's just a continuation of that. You know, you never give up, and you have found your way of connecting, whatever that is. And it just you know, demands respect. You know, it's like, after learning about your story, I have tremendous respect for you. For what you did with your life, you know, having such a rough start. So that's just important to remember, and it's not a minor thing. It's not something that should be like kept in the archive somewhere. This is like in front of you. This is a frontline thing, you know. So keep that, you know, keep that in front of you. Like, you are a success, and you have found, now with the medicine, of course, you have reached deep enough into your heart to find compassion to those who hurt you. That's the highest, that's really the highest of everything. That's the highest spiritual achievement, I would say, you know, or among those. You know, it's a huge thing, because it's naturally you would have hatred for them and negative and all the stuff, and that would be totally understandable. That's a righteous anger, you know. But instead of that, you found love for them. So that just shows me who you are. And I hope you can see that too. It just shows you who you are, that you have love in your heart. And that didn't go away, that wasn't killed by all these traumas that you experienced as a kid. So all this is good news, you know?
Yeah.
It just needs to be emphasized and remembered, you know? And the medicine was, your work here was difficult because of the trauma you experienced. You know, it's not like this for everyone. Most of the people don't have that journey. It's going straight into beauty and bliss and spiritual dimension, but it depends. Each person different, you know. So, it's hard to reach divine through the wall of pain. You know, you need to, heal that. You need to kind of move through this, and then the whole thing is there, because it is there. It is here. So your journey was difficult because of that. But the medicine, and that's really true. I see that over and over and over again. It's like, it's not always gives you what you want, but it always gives you what you need. And that might not be what you want, But eventually, when you leave, you understand that was exactly what had to happen, and that was an important element for your healing, which now transforms your life into happiness. Your life will change as a result of this work. It might take some time. It might be more subtle or less subtle. Nobody knows how that will play out, but the tendency is the same for most of the people. You do the work, and then things change. You just feel lighter. You just feel better. You just feel peace with yourself, and that brings joy and all the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think all of this life review, because for me there was like a couple of times during the ceremonies, it would push me into this life review, process. Ultimately it lightens up. It lightens up a little bit. Things that you think were very dark, or things that you did or others did. Yeah. So my hope is that this is going to be an enduring effect, so to speak, because in the moment when you feel all that love for these people that hurt you, it's very healing. And I haven't experienced later, outside of the ceremony, I haven't experienced any funny emotions. So that's what I'm saying. Hopefully this is enduring. The same with the healing of my Crohn's disease. I hope this is going to be an enduring.
So for now, it's gone?
It's gone.
It's gone completely?
Yeah.
It's amazing. So you don't need any medications, you don't need any more expensive testings.
No. And at the same time, I've changed some things regarding my diet, and so I am more careful with what I eat than I was before. I plan on slowing down a little bit, because any kind of stress triggers all kinds of physiological responses, So usually the gastrointestinal is related to stress, and so now they're discovering there's a mind-gut connection. So